Welcome to Facts Friday. I'm Kelly Lenvoy from Arthritis Consumer Experts, and on this episode of Facts Friday, we're pleased to have with us one of Canada's leading arthritis experts, Dr. John Esdaile, Scientific Director of Arthritis Research Canada and Professor of Medicine at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Esdaile, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm just fine, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me. And I think this is a great series.
What we wanted to focus on today's episode is what the future looks like for us in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think one of the first questions on people's minds when they think about the future is, when can we expect a vaccine, and what are the steps that have to be followed to get the vaccine to patients?
That's a great question for which there is no perfect answer. Historically, it's taken up to 10 years to create a vaccine, get its approval, get it all tested and all of that. Right now, there are 50 possible vaccines, up from 35 about a week ago. The Canadians are very active in it. Saskatchewan is developing a sort of classic vaccine, like a flu vaccine, but it's a coronavirus vaccine. The University of Montreal has sort of trying to fake out the virus type product. So we are moving, and the University of Alberta has a clever one where it's a DNA vaccine. So that's your genetic material, you inject it into the person, it takes over the person's cells, and they start making something that kills the COVID-19 bug. And finally, in BC, we have an exciting company who has been able to capture 500 different antibodies from seriously infected people with COVID. And of course, once you have the antibody, you could make copies of it. And they're working with Eli Lilly to do that, so that in a sick person, you could just load them up with antibodies. So the process is, you have to come up with something, you have to show that it's likely to work, and then go to what's called phase 1, the first testing in healthy humans. So there are about 50 that are now reaching that stage. Historically, if you created 100 vaccines, 10 will make it once they've made it to phase 1. So many are going to fall by the wayside. The problem that really arises is, so you've got a vaccine, you've tested it in humans, you're now doing the big final trial to see if it works. Okay, it does. You then need to be able to ramp up producing vaccine for billions of people. And the cost of just really going down this first pathway is probably a couple of billion dollars. And then, of course, if you could do that, if you could ramp up quickly, who's going to get the vaccine first? We know that that's sort of who's getting this and that right now is a topic. So these are all problems that I think, and I'm not expert in vaccine production, the thinking is it's going to take 18 months. It would be great if it were sooner, but I think we have to imagine that it's going to be 18 months with a highly expedited process. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's a realistic assessment that I think people need to understand, that this certainly is not going to happen miraculously in the next few weeks or months. I think what we understand is that there is collaboration. You've talked about the teams in Canada, but it's almost an open source project, and that is, there's this unprecedented level of international collaboration. So scientists are talking country to country, and the fact that I think most governments have said they're going to fast track the approval process, all of that notwithstanding, your assessment of, I think what we're understanding, 12 to 18 months is what we should be considering. That's going to probably, be a major factor for a lot of the decisions that governments are going to be making over that time period. one of the things that we hear government decision makers talking about right now is that when we start flattening the curve and that the levers to reopen the economy are start to being applied, the first phase of employees they're considering going back to work are ones who've developed an immunity to the infection. Can you explain to us what's meant by herd immunity? And will the rising number of people with antibodies help defeat this virus?
Yes, by all means. So herd immunity, of course, sort of suggests to a herd of cattle, but it's community immunity, so that it's really how immune is the community. And you could be immune in two ways, and you mentioned one, and we've discussed the other. So you could have the infection, develop permanent antibodies to it, or be vaccinated. And either one should give you protection against developing coronavirus infection. Now, there are some people who can't be vaccinated, especially if it's a live vaccine, people who are immunodeficient and people who perhaps are heavily immunosuppressed under a heavy cancer treatment, this sort of thing. But for all intents and purposes, if you've had it, you're immune, and if you are vaccinated, you should be immune. Now, the concept of herd immunity is you don't need 100% to be immune to stop it. That if you get it up to a high enough percent of the population who are immune through one of those two mechanisms, then the virus can't get going. It can't pass from you to me to someone else because it keeps running into people who are immune. And the question is, how much herd immunity do you need to stop this illness? The less contagious a virus is, the less easy it is to pass on from one person to another person, then the less herd immunity you need to stop it in its tracks. The more contagious it is, the higher percent. For the most serious infections, viral infections, and so on, we know what the herd immunity level is. We don't for the current COVID-19 virus because we don't know how contagious it is. We don't know how many people in the population have actually had it. The good news is last week, the Food and Drug Administration in the US approved a test, a blood test that can tell you if you've ever had it. And presumably the test is quite a good one. They've looked at it, they've approved it. So we now could start to find out, well, we know how many cases have been counted up in these daily tallies we hear about on the news or the newspaper. How many people have really had it? And then one can do a better job of saying, what percent of herd immunity do we need? Right now, the guess is very wide. The thought is we need 30% to be immune to 70% immune. And that's quite a wide bracket. Often they can say within a couple of percent. That's really the concept of herd immunity. So the thought that you started this with, if you've had it, could you go back to work? The thought would be probably yes. If you were immune to this virus, then in theory, you can't get it, so you can't pass it on. We're going to see how many people have had maybe very mild disease.
So as we wait to reach this threshold of herd immunity or wait for the introduction of a vaccine, what a lot of patients have been asking us is there a seasonality aspect to the virus like the flu? And are we going to have to deal with this again this coming fall and winter? In other words, is it going to be going from southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, and back again?
I have no idea. We will have a better idea once we know how many people have had subclinical disease. Is there going to be some immunity in the population that may make it more difficult? And we don't know that. Yes, it's not like the influenza. It's a different virus from influenza. So it may well not behave like influenza. It's in the cold virus family. And as we know, colds are generally pretty easy to pass on. And who knows, we don't even bother to serotype the common cold every time you get one. So I think the answer is we don't know that. We're going to find out, certainly, probably the hard way. There'll be facts that come forward. But right now, the truth is we can't tell you, is it going to end when the summer comes?
Dr. Esdaile, we have time for one more question, and I'll leave this open for you, and that is, on Facts Friday, we're trying to present the most current, credible information on arthritis, and in this case, what it means, COVID-19 means for our patients across Canada. Is there one insight or one fact that you want to share with our audience before we leave?
I think right now, at this moment, the self-isolation is absolutely critical. If we don't bend the curve, as is being said, the number of cases, new cases developing, hospitals will be swamped. In British Columbia, in smaller hospitals, they are having to make decisions about who gets a ventilator. I'm sure that's true in Ontario and Quebec as well. So everywhere, people have to self-isolate. Yesterday, looking out, I could see Kitts Beach with lots of people on. A friend was in Canadian Tire where there was no attempt to space people. So it's not only the public who has to really, really take this seriously, but also industry. That the vital shops that are open absolutely must ensure that there is appropriate spacing, availability of things you need to wash your hands and so on in the store. And finally, of course, we have a desperate shortage of personal protective equipment. We were not well prepared, unfortunately, as we should have been, but I think great efforts are being made to catch up.
That's so important for you to share, and thank you for that. I think a lot of us are getting bombarded with news and information from the United States, and certainly what you're describing are the essential steps that we have to take here in Canada if we want to avoid what's happening in the United States. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for taking the time for joining Facts Friday today, Dr. Esdaile. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kelly. It was always enjoyable to chat.
Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing all of you on our next episode of Facts Friday from Arthritis at Home. Thank you.